Welcome into the Wiltfong Whip Around. I'm your host, Josh Newberg, and I am live from the On3 studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm going to be joined by Steve Wiltfong himself. He's live from Indianapolis. What a weekend it was. A lot of spring games, so a lot of recruiting action taking place all around the country. Let's get right to it and bring in my friend, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, right off the top, big news, the number 6 quarterback in the country, actually heading into Sunday, the only uncommitted top 10 QB in the entire country, Hooson Longstreet. He came off the board, committed to Texas A&M. Big announcement. Steve, you nailed your RPM prediction, but this was no slam dunk. Kind of some drama late. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, we held strong on the Aggies, but we were never sleeping on Auburn down the stretch. And Hooson Longstreet was not sleeping on the Tigers going into the last day. Talked to him shortly after he made his college decision. Talked to his dad 30 minutes before he went up to the podium and announced. And they said that he finally decided between the Aggies over Auburn for sure an hour or two before he made his college decision. And I got a chance to ask Hooson why he went with Texas A&M. And he said it was the coaching staff, Coach Klein and Coach Elko. They really see the future and what they can do in College Station. He talked about going up to their spring practice and seeing the intensity of this new staff. And he thinks this is a program that can take this program and do something that Texas A&M hasn't done in history. And he wants to be part of that.
All right. Well, as one QB domino falls, it creates ripple effects across the country. I'm going to give you a team name. You let me know who you think they're in play with at quarterback. Let's just start with Auburn, because Hooson Longstreet really came down to Texas A&M and Auburn. I thought for a period of time throughout this recruitment that Longstreet was going to end up on the Plains. He does not. So now what does Auburn turn to?
Well, they don't turn. They just continue to keep recruiting 5-star quarterback Julian Lewis out of Carrollton High over there in Georgia. And over the last few weeks, it seems like Auburn's position in the Lewis sweepstakes, currently committed to USC, has really heated up. There are people around the Plains that feel really good about where they stand with Julian Lewis, who has Auburn on his short list. Now, they're certainly battling several other programs for him, Colorado, of course, USC, Alabama, and Georgia. But Auburn has some momentum in this recruitment. They went to spring practice a couple times over the last month. They like Hugh Freeze. They like his track record with quarterback. They like the proximity of the campus from the Lewis household. So there's a lot of good things going on right now for Auburn. The way they recruited last cycle, particularly wide receivers, is another eye catcher for him, with guys like Cam Coleman creating a lot of buzz. Auburn's also recruiting KJ Lacey, currently committed to the University of Texas. So they got a couple guys that are still on the board. Maybe they get involved with Keelan Russell as well.
Yeah, Keelan Russell committed to SMU. He had a big weekend at OT7, and his stock's on the rise. Now, what about Georgia? Because if we got Julian Lewis in play for Auburn, Julian Lewis is also in play for Georgia. Now, this QB domino could have been quieted had Georgia landed Matt Zollers. He goes to Mizzou 2 weeks ago, so now Georgia is still in the market for a quarterback. What do you see them? Who do you see them targeting?
Well, they're still recruiting Julian Lewis as well, and they're also heavy on Ryan Montgomery. Mike Bobo, Montgomery Van Gorder, and the Georgia coaching staff has poured a lot of time into Montgomery out of Findlay, Ohio. They had him back on campus earlier this spring. He's been there several times. His last visit to Georgia, there was a lot of film study, a lot of getting on the board and talking X's and O's, and he really enjoyed that time he spent with Coach Bobo and Coach Van Gorder doing just that. He visits South Carolina for the spring game, and that might be the last visit before he makes a final decision.
All right, so if
Florida's in there as well for Ryan Montgomery. Obviously.
All right, so if we pencil in Juju Lewis at either USC or Auburn, and then you got Georgia taking
Colorado,
and then you got Georgia.
Don't sleep on the Buffaloes, man. That's going to be a third visit to Colorado for Julian Lewis the next time he gets on campus this year. And that is right for him to walk in and be the day one starter for the Buffaloes. And so that is something that you cannot ignore. I think Julian Lewis is also, as he continues to work through his process, where can I get on the field right away? Where can I be a day one starter? In Colorado, when you look at the list right now, that's the place that's probably most advantageous to do that. Not saying he couldn't do it elsewhere, but Colorado, they're going to need someone under center next year.
Do we see Coach Prime make a visit to Carrollton, Georgia to try to get this one done? That's the big question. I kind of see.
I think he should. I think he should.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think he's
like,
worth
look,
it.
you and I talked about it a couple weeks ago. He doesn't need to go out and see everybody. And look, they've dedicated most of their resources to the transfer portal. But Deion Sanders going inside of high school, going on the road to recruit, he's a rock star, man. He's magnetic. He's charismatic. It would be huge, absolutely huge, if he went into Atlanta and went and saw Julian Lewis up at his school.
Yeah, I view Colorado in all of these QB dominoes right now. I don't see them as a favorite for anybody, but they're on the outside looking in, and they are the disruptor. They're the team that could really come in, and if they land a Juju Lewis, because then it affects Auburn, it affects Georgia, it affects USC. They can really, the Buffaloes have a chance to really disrupt the QB dominoes in the scenarios that we're playing out. So in this scenario that we're playing, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
They're one of the lead schools for Julian Lewis. And if you go back to the Jordan Seaton recruitment, behind the scenes, schools were saying he's not going to Colorado. Bam, goes to Colorado. People are suspect on Colorado's position with Julian Lewis, but you and I, we love following the visits.
Mm-hmm.
And he is going to take at least a third visit out to Colorado. He likes them. There's a lot going on there. They like Coach Shermer. They like what they saw at the spring practice. The opportunity to play day one.
Right.
Let's not sleep on Colorado here. This is one of the guys on the high school level that they're all in on, and they've done pretty good with high school guys that they've targeted. They haven't batted 1,000, but they've had some nice recruiting wins on the high school front, and this is one that they're zeroed in on.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a top tier quarterback and you're looking to go somewhere, if you're a top 5 quarterback and you want to go somewhere where you can play right away, Colorado there's no, with Shador leaving, I mean, there's nowhere else that has a spot coming open like the way that Colorado will after this season. So we'll see what shakes out there.
There'll be a quarterback competition at Auburn next year with Walker White and stuff. So that's an interesting one as well.
Yeah. If Georgia does turn the heat up on Ryan Montgomery, say that they end up landing him before the summer begins, who does that impact?
Well, South Carolina will have to go back to the drawing board. They've been all in on Ryan Montgomery. I honestly wouldn't even be able to tell you where the Gamecocks go. That's how invested they are in the Ohio product. And I've liked South Carolina's position a whole lot for Ryan Montgomery, but a recent visit to Florida was big for the Gators. Time spent with Graham Mertz, more time around Billy Napier and Coach O'Hara. He loves it in Gainesville. He also really likes it in Athens. South Carolina, they're certainly at or near the top of the list. He'll be back for the spring game. Then he'll go home, talk things over with his family, and make a college decision. Florida, they've been recruiting Antoine Hill, so certainly they're in the mix there. Keelan Russell is high on Florida. They've gotten him to campus, the Duncanville High standout out of the Lone Star State champion, who's kind of been a rocket up the recruiting boards and rankings for his performance in the fall, and then backing it up in live throwing sessions. So Florida, Keelan Russell, Antoine Hill, that's kind of who they're involved with.
All right, let's end QB dominoes with a potential flip. We know Oregon wants a quarterback. They went in hard after Hoos and Longstreet. They miss on him to Texas A&M. What could Oregon do to fill that QB2 spot? Because they already do have one quarterback committed in Akili Smith Jr., but we know they want two. They made a run at Longstreet and missed. Who could they go after?
Well, they'll still recruit Longstreet, so they'll hang around there. Will Stein and company. They're recruiting Bear Bachmeyer, like we've talked about, a Stanford commit from California, who Oregon is very high on. KJ Lacey's committed to Texas. There's been some dialogue with KJ. Now, KJ Lacey's going to be back at Texas this weekend. He was in Austin a couple weeks ago. He's got his official visit set for Texas in June. That's the only official visit that's scheduled. But there's been conversation with Auburn. There's been conversation with Oregon. And there's been conversation with Ole Miss. And so Ole Miss is in the quarterback sweepstakes still, and they're trying to get their spatula out for a couple potential guys, because you also have Deuce Knight, Josh, and he's committed to Notre Dame. But Alabama is in the middle of that one. You know, Ole Miss is there. Now, Deuce has had a great return visit to Notre Dame this spring as well, so we don't have him on split watch just yet. but some of these quarterbacks are still fielding calls and having dialogue. That list starts with Julian Lewis. He is one of the big ones out there. USC, they're doing a lot of cross-country recruiting. They have a terrific class. It's number 3 in the country right now. But guys like Julian Lewis, Justice Terry, Isaiah Gibson, they know it's going to be wars to hang on to him. But they got Lincoln Riley battling for Julian Lewis and his track record of number 1 picks and Heisman Trophy winners. Then you got Eric Henderson, their new ace recruiter coming from the NFL, who's pouring into these defensive linemen. So maybe they're going to be able to hang on to those guys. But I'll say this, Josh, if USC loses Julian Lewis, we're not going to see any panic from Lincoln Riley or company. What he's going to do is go from Brock Vandegrift to Caleb Williams. He's going to go out and target another really talented guy. They'll have their spatula out. You can surely bet on it if they don't hang on to Julian Lewis.
All right, guys, talk to me. QB Dominoes, let me know. Comment section below. How do you guys think this is all going to shake out? What's the biggest move? Are we going to see any major flips before it's all over? Let me know. Comment section below. All right. Let's head down to the Bayou and go inside LSU's big recruiting weekend. The Tigers held their annual spring game, and the recruit showed up. Let's take a look at the 5-star visitors at LSU over the weekend. Can't start without quarterback Bryce Underwood. He was back in the Bayou. This was a very important visit. Khalil Lockett and DJ Pickett as well. Steve Wiltfong, what's the significance of seeing Bryce Underwood standing next to a Khalil Lockett on the sidelines of the spring game?
Well, it gives these guys an opportunity to get to know Bryce Underwood and vice versa. This is one prospect that is not on Flip Watch right now, number 1 player in the On3 player rankings. This is another trip this calendar year down to LSU, and they just love being there and talking to his dad after the spring game, just envisioning Bryce being part of that quarterback equation next year. Watching the quarterbacks on the field play well in the spring game was exciting for him. And then getting around the recruits was also fun for the Underwood camp and their family as they continue to ingrain themselves in the LSU family. So he's obviously a lightning rod if he wants to be on the recruiting trail. And some of the best players in the country are also looking at LSU.
Yeah, and speaking of best players in the country, Khalil Lockett out of Texas, he was there, and he was at Texas the last weekend for their big visit weekend. How did LSU do with Khalil Lockett?
Well, he said, talking to Khalil Lockett after his visit, he said this place is amazing. Definitely the coaching staff, Coach Hankton and his track record, being part of a potentially special recruiting class. Brian Kelly and his success that he's had throughout his career. Those are all things that are really catching his eye. I think LSU is one of the 3 schools I'm watching the closest with Khalil Lockett, with Texas and Texas A&M. He's supposed to be back at A&M this weekend, but he's got a track meet, so I think that's going to get rescheduled. He was at Texas a couple weekends ago for what was a fantastic visit. But LSU and Texas, particularly, their offenses, the track record of receiver development and receivers being drafted at a high clip early in the NFL draft. Those are things that are speaking to Khalil Lockett right now as he heads into official visit season. Those 3 programs that I mentioned are going to get official visits.
So who are you watching with cornerback DJ Pickett? He's On3's number 1 corner. He's from Zephyr Hills, Florida. He's been taking visits. Kind of hard to get a grip on where he ends up because he's been taking so many trips. But who do you see as the main competitors for 5-star DJ Pickett?
Well, he told me that it's neck and neck with LSU and Miami, but how could he turn down the offer to play for who he thinks is the best DB coach in the country, and Corey Raymond? So LSU is sizzling in this recruitment right now. We talked about it on the Inside Scoop last night, Josh. Miami, if they have the season that they want to have this year, they could also be tough to beat with all the family ties that DJ has to the school. He's going to visit Oregon for their spring game. So they're in the middle of it. Georgia, Florida, Florida State, some of the other contenders for DJ Pickett. And it was a big weekend for LSU on the defensive line too, Josh. Just really quick, they had Jared Smith on campus. They're trying to make up ground on USC, South Carolina, and Georgia, to name a couple.
Yeah.
Damian Shanklin from my neck of the woods in Indianapolis was there. I think LSU will be he'll get back there for an official visit. He's going to announce a decision in September. Jeremiah McLeod is someone that's on flip watch, currently committed to Mississippi State. He was in Death Valley this weekend. Brandon Brown's a Texas defensive line commit from Florida that visited and had a really good time as well. And one more name to mention, offensive lineman Mario Nash Jr. from Mississippi. I think that LSU has put themselves right in the middle of that one. He's setting up his official visit soon, and I would expect him back in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, the Bengal Tiger here on the On3 Network does an incredible job of covering all things recruiting. They also landed on the Bengal Tiger reports of landing a commitment from JT Lindsay, a running back to pair with Harlem Berry. So their running back class is filling out. One more thing I want to talk about before we get out of this LSU segment, and that's wide receiver DeCorian Moore. He was expected to be in Columbus for the Ohio State spring game. He no-showed. He was at the OT 7-7-on-7. Is LSU kind of out of the woods here, or is Ohio State still a threat?
Ohio State's still in the game. I got them in the 4 spot right now for DeCorian Moore. If you're LSU, you're happy he didn't get up to Columbus to see what was a tremendous atmosphere where he could have got around Tavian St. Clair in this outstanding Ohio State class that ranks number 1 in the country. More time spent with Brian Hartline. It would have been more time spent with the receivers. And spring games, they don't mean much from a scouting eye point, but it's a celebration of spring camp ending. It's always just a fun time to be around a football program. It's always a great atmosphere. So DeCorian Moore did not get that this weekend at Ohio State. So for LSU, you're happy that they didn't gain any recruiting inches on you, but you're still losing sleep over Texas's position. Obviously, he's been to Texas a bunch. And then Oregon has been in the middle of that one for a while. He's going to visit Oregon in May. He's going to take his official visits. So LSU, man, this thing's still a marathon. Obviously, they're running near the front of the pack, but they got some guys that are trying to pass them.
Yeah. All right. LSU fans, talk to me. Comment section below. How are we feeling about the spring game recruiting intel? Number 2 class in the country. Could they make a run at number 1? I think so. Let me know how we feel in comment section below. Ohio State adds to their number 1 recruiting class. They landed a pair of commitments this weekend, and it was a big weekend for the Buckeyes. We're going to talk all about it here with Steve Wiltfong. Steve, let's start not with 2025 commitments, but with the number 1 recruit from the 2026 class, Jakeem Stewart. He was on campus. What do you make of this visit, and what does it mean for his recruitment?
Well, Jakeem Stewart's a prospect that could reclassify from 2026 to 2025. We know he's physically ready to go and to make that jump, but there's some academic things that you have to get in place to graduate from high school early and then be able to enroll in college. So he's working on that. So with that, this is a recruitment that all of a sudden seemed like it maybe had a lot of roadway, might be getting closer to getting done. And this Ohio State visit, this is a young man that's been recruited since he was in the 8th grade. He's been on the best college campuses in America. This was an anticipated trip to Ohio State, and he says it was his best one yet. So he got in on Friday, met with Ryan Day. Saturday, spent time with Larry Johnson going over film. Larry Johnson loves to get these top D-line targets on campus, and they go over their film, and it's like he's their personal coach, consultant for those couple hours. And he gave Jakeem Stewart a lot of insight and information that he really valued. And he's like, man, I could get this for the next couple of years. So that was major for him. He just loves what Coach Day and Coach Johnson have going on with the program overall. He loves the consistency of Ohio State, and he wants that type of program. I think the thing that excited him most, and it wasn't going bowling with the coaching staff, although he loved that, it was the BUs like they used Chase Young, create mismatches, using his talent to change the game. They told him he could come up there and be a game changer. He loved hearing that. But he talked about the coaching staff, Coach B.T. Jordan, Coach Alan Clark, certainly Coach Johnson. Ohio State is pouring a lot into that defensive line room from a coaching perspective. And Jakeem Stewart really felt that and just had a fabulous time. He says he's going to be back for camp. I assume, especially if he's reclassifying, we'll get some official visits on the books. Ohio State can't be slept on. Texas, USC, LSU, a few others that definitely can't be slept on as well.
Absolutely huge visit for Jakeem Stewart and the Buckeyes. Now, I alluded to the Ohio State landing a couple guys. They landed Nate Roberts, a 6'4", 220-pound tight end in the On3 top 150. Also, three-star safety Cody Haddad committed on Saturday. Steve, Buckeyes stay hot. Who could be Ohio State's next commitment to this #1 class?
Quite a few guys that I think that they lead for. Which just go 5 really quick. Jamie French, receiver from Sunshine State. Still think they lead there. Vanell Brown, the third, an absolute electric player from the Sunshine State. I think Ohio State is setting the pace there. Jordan Davison, coveted running back from California, still like Ohio State there. Quincy Porter is a receiver from New Jersey. They're battling Michigan for. Talking with colleague Chad Simmons, give the edge to Ohio State right now. And then Justin Hill is an in-state edge rusher from Cincinnati, Winton Woods. He's going to be narrowing his list even more here in the near future. And until I hear different, I like where Ohio State stands there, but there is major competition for Justin Hill. So Ohio State, their race for the #1 class after landing tight end Nate Roberts, landing safety Cody Haddad over the weekend. They are still sprinting here into the summer, leading for a few more blue chippers.
Look at Ohio State recruiting with this sense of urgency this offseason. I wonder why. All right, Buckeye fans, tap in. Talk to me. Who do you guys think is going to be the next Ohio State commitment? Let me know. Comment section below. All right, Steve, let's get to the most exciting part of the show, your latest RPM picks or Fong bombs.
Well, let's just highlight 2 of them from the weekend. On 300 receiver Raiden Vines Bright took a visit to Washington over the weekend. And Chad Simmons and I have RPM this young man to Washington. Jed Fishing Company, we're on him early. A great visit out west. Several sources indicate Washington is trending there. And then Jonte Newman is an offensive lineman from the Lone Star State that Texas A&M had on their campus this past weekend. And I think A&M's the one to beat there. He's their top interior offensive line target that's on the board, that's uncommitted right now. And I like the way that's setting up for Mike Elko and company. Texas A&M, all of a sudden, they landed a commitment from Husan Longstreet yesterday. They landed a commitment from the 4-star offensive lineman Garcia yesterday. They're the hottest team in the country right now. Josh on the trail. Maybe Jonte Newman close to jumping in next.
All right. Now, also want to preview, you and Chad Simmons are dropping a monster insider on the on3.com front page. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. Well, Charles Power, Cody Belair, our scouting department at On3, separate from the recruiting department, updating their rankings on today for the 2025 class. And so we have the insider on some of the top uncommitted players in the country. So Elijah Griffin, the #2 player overall in America. We still like Georgia there. But more intel like that. What do we think on David Sanders coming out of his recent visit to Tennessee, 2nd in 2 weeks? I think that Tennessee is in that top 3 or 4 right now with Clemson, Georgia, and Ohio State. So a lot on the best players in the country coming later today on on3.com.
What a busy weekend it was. Steve, appreciate you taking some time for the Wiltfong Whip Around today, and it's going to be another action-packed week with the portal heating up tomorrow. We'll talk more about it on Thursday's episode.